If you've ever wondered how men juggle multiple women without losing sleep, losing track, or losing their minds, you're asking the wrong question. The better question, the question that actually reveals the game, is how they manage to keep each woman convinced she's the only one who carries emotional significance. Men don't balance women, they quarantine them. A man's emotional life is a medieval castle. Stone walls, sealed chambers, narrow corridors, only he knows. Women imagine they're lounging in the throne room, unaware they've been filed neatly into a side chamber, far from the actual levers of control. Let me drag you into the psychological basement few dare to look at. Men survive emotional intensity the same way soldiers survive war, by separating everything into clean compartments that never touch. It isn't intelligence. It isn't malice. It's instinct. Primitive. Efficient. Ruthless. And if that offends you, that's your problem. Offense is a luxury people cling to when they don't understand the rules. This compartmentalization is the backbone of a man's romantic strategy. Not because he wakes up scheming like some B-grade villain, but because it protects him from emotional collapse. One research paper from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that men overwhelmingly rely on cognitive partitioning to manage emotional conflict, meaning they literally separate emotional experiences into sealed mental boxes to reduce stress. Women process emotion like a river. Men process it like a filing cabinet. And that filing cabinet is where most women get lost. Because men don't categorize women based on beauty, kindness, loyalty, or what you posted on your birthday. No, men categorize women based on the emotional threat level. The ones who can shatter him go into the deepest vault, untouched, kept at a distance, handled like nuclear material. The ones who only dent him, they get placed in the casual drawers. And the ones who pose no threat at all, bless their souls, become background noise, the elevator music of his emotional life. Here's what most of you don't realize. A man can sleep with a woman, laugh with her, share stories, even look deeply into her eyes while pretending to be mesmerized, all while keeping her sealed in a category she never gets promoted from. That's the cold part. You can give him loyalty, softness, consistency, and he will still treat you like a temporary amusement parked safely in a mental storage locker, labeled pleasant but replaceable. If that stings, good. It should. Pain sharpens awareness. Awareness sharpens strategy. But let's get darker. Men don't just compartmentalize women. They compartmentalize versions of themselves. The man you think you know is not the man someone else knows. He's a chameleon with a private color palette. He adapts not out of deception, but out of efficiency. He becomes the man required for each compartment. It's not multiple personalities. It's multiple roles. He is a lover in one room, a friend in another, a ghost in a third, and a knight in a fourth. Each version protects the others. The tragedy is that women think they're dealing with the whole man. You're not. You're dealing with the version of him he allows you to access. The version that fits the narrative he wants with you. And if you don't know how to read which compartment he's placed you in, you will waste years misinterpreting crumbs as loyalty. But before you accuse him of being heartless, understand this. He does it because emotional fluidity terrifies him. Most men walk through life haunted by the fear of needing someone too much, because needing means losing control. So they minimize risk by spreading emotional investment across multiple chambers. It's insurance. If one woman leaves, the entire emotional structure doesn't collapse. The rest of the system absorbs the shock. Brutal? Yes. Effective? Absolutely. This is why a man can tell one woman she's the only one, then drive across town and give another woman the exact same speech with the same tone, same intensity, same carefully timed silence afterward. Not because he's a sociopath, but because he's learned to replicate emotional intimacy without actually surrendering to it. He performs vulnerability like a stage role, convincing, controlled, rehearsed in the privacy of his own mind. But here's where it gets interesting. Women who know how to play men, really play men, see straight through the walls. They smell the compartment from the moment they walk in. They watch his tone, the rhythm of his body language, the way he speaks about his busy schedule, the tiny flickers in his eyes when they ask a question that touches the wrong psychological door. Smart women don't demand access. They evaluate access. They walk into the castle, glance around, and instantly know which chamber he threw them into. And here's the twist. These women become his obsession, not because they're pretty, not because they're kind, but because they represent something he cannot file away neatly. They disrupt his compartments like a virus corrupting a hard drive. Men who can juggle 5 women with ease always fall hardest for the one woman who doesn't sit quietly in the box he assigned her. She becomes unpredictable, unclassifiable, unmanageable, and men lose their minds over what they cannot manage. Now, let's poke at this a little deeper. Men don't compartmentalize because they're evil. They compartmentalize because they lack internal discipline. Emotional chaos terrifies them, so they desperately organize their connections the way a paranoid king organizes his enemies, by isolating each threat. They don't think, how can I hurt her? They think, how can I survive her? The difference is subtle, but the impact is devastating. This is why so many women lose the game before they even know it started. You think you're competing with other women. You're not. You're competing with the version of you he built in his head and stuck in a drawer. A fantasy, a controlled simulation, and you will never beat a fantasy by acting real. You win by becoming the woman he cannot categorize. That is the entire game. And if you want to know how to become that woman, you must first understand how easily men are thrown off balance. They look strong, but emotionally, they're glass cannons. Deadly on offense, fragile on defense. The moment a woman stops trying to pry open the emotional compartments and instead forces him to step out of them on his own, the entire architecture collapses. That is when he pursues. That is when he becomes transparent. That is when he stops juggling. He stops not because he grows morally awakened, but because you've become the only chamber he cannot control. This is what I teach my clients in one-on-one coaching. Not sterile advice, not affirmations, not be confident fluff. I teach you how to walk into the psychological palace men think is secure and rearrange the furniture without lifting a finger. I teach you how to unnerve them calmly, elegantly, strategically. That's why the coaching is pinned in the comments. Because the women who want to master this, really master this, always seek precision. And yes, the landing page is done. The PDF and the video training are there waiting for you. And if you have even a drop of ambition, you should be subscribed to the newsletter. The program, The Feminine Game, will be available for pre-order on that page too. Consider it the textbook for everything men hope you never figure out. But we're just getting started. Most women have no idea how deeply men rely on emotional compartmentalization to maintain their sense of dominance. A man's identity is fragile in ways he will never admit. His ego is a glass artifact he guards like a relic, shiny, brittle, constantly at risk of cracking under the weight of vulnerability. So instead of strengthening himself, he partitions his emotional exposure, like a corrupt politician shredding evidence. And you, bless your idealistic heart, walk into his life thinking, transparency is a birthright. You think because he texts you every night, because he calls you baby, because he remembered your favorite drink at that dimly lit lounge he dragged you to, that you've slipped into his central chamber. No, you've slipped into his routine. A routine is not intimacy. A routine is a habit with lipstick. A man can fold you into his nightly rotation without ever letting you inside the room where his real emotions sleep. Let's go further down the tunnel. When men emotionally compartmentalize multiple women, they also compartmentalize the emotional risk each woman represents. This is why you can give a man devotion, softness, and consistency, and he will still prioritize the woman who gives him uncertainty. Not because uncertainty is better, but because uncertainty forces him to break his own compartments. She destabilizes him. And men, despite all their bravado, crave destabilization from the right source. A woman who makes his mind feel unpredictable becomes his psychological addiction. But here's where women get sloppy. They think unpredictability means chaos, mood swings, tantrums, emotional theatrics. No, that's amateur work. That's clown energy. A real disruptor doesn't yell. She doesn't beg. She doesn't pry for answers like every other emotionally thirsty contender in his inbox. She keeps him guessing without performing. She carries herself with the cold serenity of someone who knows the doors he's hiding behind and refuses to knock. This is the kind of woman who burns through his compartments like acid. She is the one who makes him replay conversations at night. The one he stalks silently on social media pretending he's just checking. The one who makes him hesitate when he texts other women, because suddenly those interactions feel beneath him. She becomes the psychic virus that corrupts his system. And the funny thing? Most women want to be chosen, but the ones who actually command power don't seek to be chosen at all. They seek to be unavoidable. They become the psychological equivalent of gravity, inescapable, omnipresent, impossible to compartmentalize. But let's dissect the darker edges of this game. Men compartmentalize multiple women because it protects them from emotional accountability. If he can keep each connection sealed in a separate mental chamber, then no single woman can demand consistency. He can deliver intensity in one room, detachment in another, minimal effort in a third, and wounded vulnerability in a fourth. Each room comes with its own script, and none of the women realize they're reading from different plays. This is where emotional delusion thrives. You think you're special because he told you something he's never told anyone. Meanwhile, he said the same line 3 days earlier to someone else, but with different lighting. Men recycle intimacy the way actors recycle monologues. It's not sincerity, it's performance optimized. And yet you keep believing. Because women are wired to connect, and men are wired to preserve themselves. But here's the savage irony. The women who learn to compartmentalize men back, those women ascend to the highest tier of the psychological food chain. They stop playing the nurturing archetype and evolve into something far more dangerous. A woman who doesn't need emotional reciprocity to win. She becomes a strategist, a watcher, a collector of male tells. She can look at a man's pattern in 5 minutes and see the blueprint he thought he'd hidden under layers of charm and trauma. And he feels it. Oh, he feels it. You've seen it before. The shift in his posture, the sudden carefulness in his tone, his need to clarify meaningless details, the nervous little laughs. That's not attraction. That's fear. Not fear of you. Fear of what you see in him. A man who compartmentalizes women is terrified of being seen whole, because his entire identity relies on fragmentation. Expose the fragments, and you expose the man. But here's the part they never expect. Once a woman understands the internal architecture of male compartmentalization, she stops trying to enter his chambers altogether. She becomes her own citadel. Men stop being emotional vaults she's desperate to unlock. They become artifacts she studies, carefully, casually, coldly. Her emotional energy stops leaking, and the moment she stops leaking, she becomes dangerous. This is the moment the game flips, because now he is the one trying to penetrate your compartments. Suddenly, he is the one wondering what category he belongs in. He starts probing lightly, then intensely. He asks subtle questions to gauge your emotional investment. He becomes hyper-aware of other men around you. He becomes paranoid about his place in your life. You have become the uncertainty he cannot sort. And nothing terrifies a compartmentalizing man more than a woman he cannot categorize. That is when he begins to collapse his other chambers. Not because he's noble, but because he needs all available emotional energy focused on decoding you. Men abandon their entire rotation the moment they sense they are losing control of their most strategically dangerous connection. This is why the most powerful women are not the ones who give men everything. They are the ones who give men nothing they didn't earn. This is the essence of what I teach in coaching, the art of emotional advantage, not manipulation, not cruelty, advantage. You learn to unfold men like maps. You learn to stop reacting. You learn to hold your silence with precision. You learn to weaponize your absence without theatrics. You learn to embody the kind of psychological gravity that makes compartmentalization impossible. And men hate it, but they chase it. This is why the women who join my coaching programs walk differently, think differently, operate differently. Because once you see how men store women in those emotional filing cabinets of theirs, you stop volunteering to be placed in one. You start building the emotional aura that forces a man to reorganize his entire inner structure just to keep you near. And yes, the landing page is live. The free PDF and video are there waiting for you. The newsletter is waiting for you. The pre-order for the feminine game is waiting for you. You're either a spectator of this game or a strategist within it. Spectators get broken. Strategists get worshipped. The deeper truth, the one most women never get close enough to smell, is that a man's emotional compartmentalization is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of fear, dressed elegantly in the clothes of mystery. Men keep multiple women in different chambers, not because they are powerful, but because they are terrified of giving any single woman the authority to collapse their interior world. When you finally understand that, the entire game changes. You stop worshiping the man who splits himself into fragments, and you start seeing him for what he is, a ruler who can only maintain power by dividing his kingdom. A man who is truly whole doesn't need chambers. He doesn't need walls. He doesn't need emotional hostages. He isn't forced to dilute himself across several women just to feel balanced. But most men, they're far from whole. They're stitched together with duct tape, ego, and the faint hope that no one will ever notice how flimsy their internal architecture really is. This is why they create multiple emotional compartments. Each woman absorbs a different part of the identity he cannot face alone. You're not dating a man. You're dating a fragment of him. And the tragedy is that most women grow attached to the fragment, believing they've unlocked the full vault. Meanwhile, another woman sleeps soundly, believing the same thing. And another. And another. The funniest thing? Men tell you exactly which chamber you belong in. You just don't listen. It's in the tone of his apologies, the timing of his affection, the way he prioritizes you when he's bored, but becomes mysteriously unavailable when he's emotionally exposed. These are not random behaviors. They're breadcrumbs leading you to the door of the compartment he's shoved you in. He compartmentalizes you because he knows you would never stay if you saw the full mess inside him. And so he hides it, not through deception, but through selective access. Men are skilled at offering emotional intimacy in microdoses. Enough to keep you invested, never enough to hold leverage over him. This is why so many women crumble in the presence of a man who finally opens up. They think emotional exposure is a gift. They think it's a sign of trust. They think it means they've entered the innermost chamber. But with men, vulnerability is not intimacy. Vulnerability is a tactic. They offer you just enough chaos to make you feel special, but not enough to give you any real power. A man will cry in your arms, then drive home and compartmentalize the entire breakdown into a drawer labeled momentary weakness, ignore. And you, meanwhile, will interpret it as a milestone. This is the asymmetry that destroys women who step into the game unprepared. Men treat emotion like warfare. Women treat emotion like language. And because of that, most women walk into men's emotional lives like diplomats entering a battlefield, armed with empathy, expecting conversation, unaware that the terrain itself is hostile. But the women who understand the battlefield, those who walk in with silence, strategy, and patience, those women become a force men cannot categorize. And when a woman defies categorization, she becomes the anomaly that rewrites his entire system. Suddenly, he's deleting old compartments. Suddenly, he's ghosting the backup rotation he swore he wasn't attached to. Suddenly, he's terrified to lose the one woman he cannot place neatly into an emotional chamber. Because you, unlike the others, never begged for entry. You never pried open the doors. You never asked for clarity. You simply walked through his castle, observed quietly, touched nothing, and yet rearranged everything. That is the essence of feminine power. Not force, not demand, but presence so strategically calibrated that it destabilizes a man from the inside out. And this is where most women fail. They hear the rules, but they lack the discipline to apply them. They know the game, but they play with emotion instead of strategy. They desire the man more than they desire their own leverage. And leverage is the only currency in male psychology. This is why one-on-one coaching exists. Not because you need advice. Advice is cheap, abundant, and mostly useless. You need recalibration. You need someone who can dissect your patterns with the precision of a surgeon. Expose the emotional leaks you keep trying to patch with optimism, and redesign your approach from the ground up. You need someone who understands the male psyche in its raw, unpolished form, not the sanitized version men feed you when they want to look noble. Coaching gives you power, not the cartoonish kind, the quiet kind, the kind that makes men second-guess themselves, the kind that forces them to reveal which chamber you're in without them even realizing they're confessing. The link is pinned in the comments. The landing page is live. The free PDF is there, along with the video that lays out the foundations of this entire game. If you have any sense, you'll read it. Twice. Then subscribe to the newsletter because I release things there that I will never say publicly. And yes, the feminine game is available for pre-order. Think of it as the textbook for this entire universe. A manual for women who don't just want to survive the psychological battlefield, but dominate it with elegance. We're nearing the end, so let me leave you with this final truth. The one that will free you from the confusion that's been eating your self-worth alive. A man's emotional compartments are only as powerful as your desire to be inside them. Once you stop trying to enter, he loses control. Once you stop reacting, he loses his authority. Once you stop needing access, he starts chasing your presence. Men cannot compartmentalize a woman who refuses to shrink. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe. There's more coming, and the next video will hit harder than this one. And tell me in the comments below, which compartment do you think you've been placed in? And which one are you ready to burn down? Your move.